Good morning, everyone. We are now going to kick off today's webinar. Thank you to everyone joining us today for the productivity problem webinar, where we'll be looking at how our working environment today is impacting us, our employees, from visual stress to our brains to sleep and wider. And hopefully you'll be leaving with some tangible actions that you can take away for yourself and teams to help improve the outcomes currently in the workplace. Just in terms of format today, we'll be speaking for about 40 minutes on the topic today, but we do have a question and answer at the end. So please, can I instruct everyone to leave your questions for the panel we have today in the question and answer box. And when we get to the Q&A, we'll open that up and go through the questions for. And before we kick off, there's going to be a few brief introductions and also sharing who's put on this webinar for all. Whilst we do that, there is a poll up, and if you haven't already voted, vote for your daily average screen time, and we'll share those results shortly in a moment. But without further ado, we'll crack on and give you an insight into who's put on these webinars for you today. Firstly, today's brought to you by Posturite and Ocushield, and Posturite is a leading specialist in workplace ergonomics, DSE, and musculoskeletal well-being. So Posturite, if you don't already know, support organizations to create a healthier, safer, and more productive work environment through expert DSE assessments, ergonomic equipment, and evidence-based workplace design. Posturite work with employees to reduce discomfort, prevent injury, and improve day-to-day working comfort across the office. And their approach involves practical assessments, whether in person or online, to help to make sure that employees are seated and properly supported around their workstations and more. Secondly, Ocushield, an organization that I'm part of. Ocushield is an eye care company. We support businesses when it comes to all things eyes. So we're using screens now more than ever, and eye care in the workplace has always been around testing eyes. And Ocushield actually brings digital eye screening to the workplace, so employees can screen their eyes in 4 minutes. And also, if they need an eye examination, we also provide eye care vouchers to opticians, such as Specsavers on the high street. So reducing the admin workload for HR, but also providing a benefit that employees can use whether they're in the office, at home, or wider. Right, on to our wonderful speakers that we have today. If I can get Ellis to introduce yourself first, that will be fantastic.
Good morning. Yes, thank you. My name is Ellis. I am a business psychologist specialising in workplace wellbeing, leadership, and learning and development. I'm also the founder of Mindset, which is a consultancy organisation, and we have recently celebrated 9 years. And we work internationally with businesses across the world. And in a nutshell, I suppose that means that I understand how people tick, especially at work. And I use evidence-based practice and approaches to help organizations understand not just what is impacting how people work, but also why and how we need to make sustainable change.
Thank you, Ellis. And Katie?
Hello, good morning, everyone. So I'm Katie. I run a business called Get Your Shit Together, or just if you don't like swearing, which I understand. Essentially, what we do at Gist is we work with companies, helping them understand the impact that stress has on an individual, how that can impact teams, and what does that mean for an organization as a whole. And we look at data analytics, and we can really understand the behaviors that are showing up in organizations and what that means for your culture, how people collaborate, how people communicate, and obviously what that means for your business as a whole. And so that's essentially what I do. And I specialize in burnout as well, obviously, if I talk about stress.
Thank you, Katie. And lastly, from my side, my background is clinical, so I'm a trained optometrist, and my role involves looking after people and getting obsessed around how we as consumers and employees are engaging with screens and how that impacts our visual system from dry eye syndrome to digital eye strain. So that's the hat I'll be wearing today and supporting the conversations here with my fellow panel. Right. So to kick things off, I'm going to answer questions to the panel. So in one sentence each, what's the real problem with screen heavy work that most teams underestimate?
Oh, I could do it in 2 words, I think. Brain drain is probably something that I'm most concerned of. The constant demands, the task switching, the attention switching, the multitasking, the information overload. It's just so cognitively demanding on both our brains and our bodies.
So, Ellis, you stole my answer. So, I was going to say mental fatigue as well. I think that the amount of information that we're taking in is something that we've never experienced in human experience before. The constant changing of tasks, having to switch from like emails to Zoom calls to then having to respond to emails. It takes a lot of physical, mental, and emotional energy to be able to switch between all of those. And so that mental fatigue is immense.
Great. And what do you both think is why is this a productivity and performance issue and not just, a well-being topic?
Just affects so many different parts of us. So you've got the brain, and it affects it's particularly the type of work that we're doing on screen is so cognitively demanding for all the reasons that we've both already said. And we've got access to so many different platforms and information. And nowadays we place so much more demand on people than we ever have done before at work. And that impacts our focus and attention. Then in turn, that affects our well-being because we're just mentally and physically exhausted from that constant connectivity. This affects our eyes, as people have already mentioned in the webinar chat about how it just causes that eye strain and eye fatigue. And I think it can even screen use has even been linked to short-sightedness and even our posture as well. So if you're constantly using the screen, then we change our posture to adapt to that screen. So you're most likely going to tilt your head forward. And there's even something called tech neck now, which is causing a lot of physical and musculoskeletal injury. So altogether, we're not creating the best environment or conditions for people to work at our best, which is why it's a productivity and performance issue as well as well-being.
I think I'll add to that. I think there's a massive, if we go back to COVID times when we really saw a huge change in how we worked, I mean, most of us were going into the office and there would have been breaks having that conversation and we would have split our time a little bit. So there was, even though it might not have been structured downtime, there would have been downtime throughout the day. Whereas now we're working from home more and the way that we have worked has dramatically changed. I think we can all agree with that. And I think when we think about it from a well-being and a performance, when we look at the two and how they're different. Well, one, well-being is going to tie directly into performance. If you're not feeling great, if you've got mental fatigue, if you're emotionally exhausted from having to juggle so much, it's going to directly impact how you are able to show up, perform. And then obviously I talk a lot about stress, and obviously there's good stress, which I would call pressure. And obviously there's that distress, so what we'd call negative stress, and how we're juggling that has dramatically changed simply also because of how we're using tech, what we're engaging in, the constant changes, the constant emails. I think someone's put in here as well that, getting an email out of nowhere or the constant flow of emails can be extremely overwhelming. It doesn't allow us to do deep work and it can really impact that performance and obviously stress us out a little bit, which isn't great for our health.
It's not, no, it's not. And I think it's quite timely for me to also share this report that came out actually a couple of weeks ago from Bupa. And they looked at a YouGov survey of 5,052 adults working in a tech environment. So effectively, that just means people are office-based, working behind a screen. And I'll leave this on screen, but Ellis, Katie, what do you want to unpack from this slide and any of the stats here? I'll hand it over to you.
I mean, I'm going to touch on the burnout. I think something that we really have to touch on, which is a really big issue for most organizations right now, is burnout. It's one of their leading causes of people having to be taken off work, musculoskeletal injuries, eye strain, all that kind of stuff. But when we look at burnout and we think about, just the slight history of it, I mean, it was the NHS came out and said it was a diagnosable syndrome in 2019. It was originally coined in the 1970s. And what we've seen since just the World Health Organization made it a diagnosable syndrome is that 41% has increased and it has stabilized, but it's stabilized at a really high level. We're looking at anywhere between, this is saying 41% have experienced burnout at least once monthly. We've also seen stats of coming up to sort of 45, 48% of people going through burnout just in 2025. And we're also looking at, 20% of people having to be signed off from work just last year from stress-related health injuries. And this is all going in how we're working. Obviously, we can look at the juggling of the work life and the home life as well, but it's massive. You just look at the mental fatigue, the eye strain, it's all very, very high stats. People are struggling with it.
Yeah, can I ask Katie as well for layman's? I mean, for
Mhm.
myself in this question, when it comes to burnout, what do you define as someone being burnt out, right? Before they've got to
Mhm.
they've been signed off work, what is, in your mind when you say someone's burnt out, how do you define it?
So I'm gonna be slightly cheeky, and I'm going to do a paraphrase of the what the World Health Organization says burnout is, and I want to see what people agree with and what people don't agree with. So, paraphrasing what the World Health Organization describes as burnout is it's physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion that occurs from prolonged stress. That's a workplace phenomenon. So, I want to hear from people that are listening who here would agree with that whole statement. So I'm going to slowly say it again because I do know I talk fast. So it's physical, mental, emotional exhaustion from prolonged stress. That's a workplace phenomenon. So you agree with it all? Okay, we've got people disagreeing with some. So we've got not agreeing with the workplace.
Uh, it's interesting because yeah, I think people are also saying outside of the work, and now with hybrid working, I think the lines have been blurred, right? Where we're working from home and we're looking after the kids on the school run, or then there's an emergency, have to do something else within the home that it all merges. So yeah, I can see why people are talking about
Yeah,
not just the workplace as well.
I mean, I put the full stop just after prolonged stress. I don't think it's a workplace phenomenon. I think it's quite
I
dangerous to
agree.
just to couple it as a workplace issue. I think is something that we have to grasp, and as workplaces we have to grasp is that we are whole human beings and we are drawing our energy and our resources from one source. It's not like we effectively compartmentalize and go, oh, I'm stressed from work, so I'm going to burn out. But I've got a completely different resource with stress at home. It's usually the merging of the two.
I agree. But I do think that the workplace design at present is one of the biggest factors in terms of causes of burnout. So I can understand why people might say, I agree with it. But I do agree that actually the full stop should come where you suggested, Katie, because there are loads of causes of burnout that aren't just workplace factors.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And if I can ask Tom to show the results of the poll that we did earlier, I wonder how much that might feed into things. So we asked what's the daily average screen time, and hopefully you guys can see the results on screen now. But the majority of people, 45% up to 9 hours on screens, and 23% more than 9 hours on screens, which is of course going to be impacting everyone.
I've got a really random question for you, Dhruvan. Have you noticed in like since COVID times, has our screen time dramatically increased? Have you noticed that from the work that you do?
Yeah, I think from COVID, it was a point where massive behavioral change happened across numerous demographics, and you had an older generation that started adopting technology to speak to their loved ones, right? So you had, now what that looks like is them using more of Facebook or whatever else, and them stuck on devices in that way. But then also because of COVID, people that were office based, and correct me if I'm wrong, but everyone was pretty much working 12-hour days. I feel like you had nothing to do apart from walk to the supermarket or work, right? So people just got more ingrained with that screen time and working and used to it. And now, as we're seeing a lot of organizations still hybrid, I think people again, have adjusted their schedules, which is great, but people are also working, maybe early mornings, late in the evening, and that cumulative screen time has definitely grown, versus pre-pandemic, because it's become that norm. And COVID set off that foundation really for it to say, right, the normal is this high, but now we've kind of come back below slightly, but it's still more than it was previously.
So the set point's higher than it was pre-COVID, which set off a bit of a chain reaction. That makes
Exactly,
sense.
exactly that. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, Katie,
Mhm.
what happens in the brain under stress, and why is it so hard to switch off once it becomes chronic?
So I'm going to give a slight, hopefully I don't go off on too much of a tangent. If I do, just rein me in. But I want to talk a little bit about how our brain processes information in general. So if we think about it, we're all sitting here, we're all either listening to a webinar or I'm presenting, talking on a panel. And one thing that I do want to talk about is the three different parts of the brain. The brain is more complicated than that. I totally recognize that. But for this sake, I want to go through the three different parts. So we've got a part of the brain that is solely based on survival, and this is what we would call where our fight or flight response is. Majority of the people in here have probably heard of the fight or flight response. For those who don't know what it is, it's an automatic physiological response to a perceived threat. So this was really important when we're hunter and gatherers. So if we go way back in time when we were, having to hunter and gather our food, if we were walking down a path and we saw a saber-toothed tiger, we didn't want to consciously figure out, hey, can I pat that cat? I really want to, can I domesticate it? Can it be my best friend? We don't want to do that. We want to be automatically primed to either run away or fight that potential threat. So that's that part of the brain, which is really important. It's all about survival. Then we've got the next part of the brain, which is the limbic system, and sort of where we look at where our memories lie, where our habits are designed, where our emotions sit. It's also where we make decisions. So, we're looking at every decision that we make is usually based on not usually, it is based on an emotion, whether good or bad or whatever it is. Then we get to the human part of the brain, which we can call like the computer part, which is where, once when we're in a calm state, we can take those decisions and we can analyze them. We can understand, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? How do we build plans from that? Who could this impact? Looking at all those, communication and language centers as well. Now, when we're under chronic stress, what can happen is we do get that mental fatigue. It is a very exhausting thing for the body and the brain. And we can actually get to the part where we do struggle to get that information up to the human part of the brain to sort of really look at those pros and cons because we're exhausted. So we can find that we become very reactionary. We start developing habits and behaviors that are based on our stress coping mechanism set point. And it really changes how we respond to people, how we decision make, how we problem solve, and just our habits. If we just think about when we're stressed out, what are some of the habits that we may engage in or not engage in? I know for me personally, something that I've previously done because I've burnt out twice in my life before. When I was in the midst of chronic stress, one of the things was I would wake up earlier to get more work done. I would go to bed later to try and get that work done as well. I might eat, either eat less or not eat as healthy as I normally would. I might not set structured time to exercise. So all of these things, but I also significantly changed my downtime. So I never really allowed myself to have that physical, mental decompression time. And that ended up just really changing how I behaved, the habits I engaged in, the actions that I took as well, which is a huge issue for majority of the people that I work with. And when we think about the workplace, when those habits and those behaviors sort of collide, it can really change how we collaborate, how we communicate, how we sort of work together. And that can have a massive ripple effect on performance and well-being and all that jazz.
Thank you, Katie. And yeah, Katie Ellis, I guess, when we're stressed, I do a lot myself as well. Even after where you've had cognitive load of, let's say, being in a meeting, you immediately maybe go onto your phone or you kind of scroll. Why do we do that when we're stressed or want to break?
It's what's on the screens. Those apps activate our brain's reward system, and web and app companies often have roles which they now call attention engineers, which I think just is really terrifying. But their literal jobs are to design the web and application to gain your attention, to spend as much time on their site as possible, and there's that positive conditioning where you will see a new post or an offer or a pop-up, or every AI now is designed so that it ends in a question, so that you're like constantly being fed another option to do something again. Um, there's also some negatives to that. So you might find that you're given an offer and you'll miss out if you don't do that thing right now, or you'll stress about ignoring your emails because it's quite hard to find them on the app that you might be using. Um, so it can be really difficult to access or that information if you don't keep browsing longer. Um, Either way, it's quite an addictive pattern that they have
Mm.
designed. And it's also the instantness and the constantness, and the ease of how these apps have been designed, so that other activities feel less interesting to us because the reward isn't quick enough. So reading or writing on paper or dialing a number or having a conversation face to face almost feels like a chore because the reward takes longer. So there's less reward opportunities. Whereas when you have these other apps, it's so quickly. Um, but the problem is it's a bit of a toxic cycle because it's so overstimulating. It's both addictive and equally draining.
Mm.
I can I just add to that as well? I
Of
absolutely
course.
agree with that. If you look at, I can't remember the documentary, but there's a documentary that was all about the people that created like Gmail, Facebook, and pretty much they brought neuroscientists in to make it addictive. On top of that, if we think about when we're feeling stressed, what do we want to do? We don't want to feel stressed anymore. We don't want to feel anxious. So we want to distract ourselves. So what we can do is what I found is that we use, our phones and our apps, and even if it's just checking your emails or scrolling social media or whatever it is, it can actually be a way to sort of soothe our stress and anxiety, but it's usually counterproductive in a
Mm,
massive way. But it is something when we look at coping mechanisms, escapism is definitely a coping mechanism, and we're finding more and more people are using these apps and our phones and screens as a way to distract ourselves and to soothe that stress. To sort of go, I'm feeling really stressed out after that meeting. Let me just go on
Mm.
Instagram or whatever, and it's not always the healthiest thing, but it's what we've been conditioned to do.
Yeah, t totally. And now, I mean, we talk about habits a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people here read that book, Atomic Habits, but I forget the author's name. But we've actually got a poll, if we can bring up. We want to know who opens or looks at their email, or let's say phone, as soon as you wake up. And the reason we've got this poll as well is when we're talking about behavior, if we're starting the day with accessing our device, whether it's personal or for work, and depending on what we do, some of us might go on email, some of us might scroll on Instagram. It does 9 times out of 10 set your intention for the day. Especially, if I'm on Instagram, if I'm being targeted by things that make me want to be transported to another world in terms of a holiday, and I'm feeling, oh crap, why have I got to go to work today? It changes your psyche for that day. So it'll be good to understand who here, um, yeah, looks at their phone in the morning, just as a bit of a statistic. But hopefully you can all see the poll. Whilst everyone's voting, I guess Tom, we can bring up the results in a moment, once that's done. Um, and guys, yeah, what's the early warning signs that for teams that are normalizing mentally and emotionally, that signal that stress overload at the moment?
I think you could break it into behavioral signs, physical signs, and emotional signs. So behaviorally, what I notice is that people have this lack of boundaries between their work and home life. So the poll is suggesting, if you are reaching your phone and you're checking emails or Teams almost straight away, it's often a sign that there's that lack of boundary. So if you notice that people are working outside of their contracted hours and they're not doing so to be flexible working, so they're not taking the time back, if you understand, then that's likely to signal some overload. I also see that people just don't take breaks anymore. So all too often we're just working through lunch, we're eating at our desk, and we're not giving our brains and bodies a chance to reset. Doom scrolling is another thing you could add, I suppose, for behavioural signs. You've got physical signs, so of course, headaches, eye strains, aches and pains from poor sitting and posture. Um, Sleep changes is one of the first things we often see, and fatigue. And then you've got the emotional signs as well. So lack of enjoyment in things from the burnout, that lack of exhaustion, constant worry. Katie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I'm going to be a slightly cheeky and I want to talk about I'm going to bring burnout back into the conversation because I think burnout's the destination, right? When you've not dealt with stress and you're looking at those behaviors and we're looking at those symptoms, we're sort of going towards that burnout element. I always, whenever I start working with a company or when I work with an individual or teams in general, we always start at the very start. So when we think about the very beginning stages of burnout, there's not normally a huge amount of physical, mental, and emotional signs. What we're actually seeing is changes in habits. So if like exactly what you were saying before, Ellis, which was, have the boundaries crossed? Are you waking up early to get more work done? Signing in after those core working hours? Have you not, engaged in something that you usually engage in, like a hobby or something that you usually enjoy? Have you stopped having downtime lunch and all that kind of jazz? Have you not been able to do your exercise routine, whether that's just like 5 minutes of walking around your garden, whatever it is? When we think about the first signs, it's usually our habits that change, and they quickly can progress into, the latest, like, the early warning signs of burnout. And that might be maybe you have because what typically happens when we've changed our habits at an early stage, we've usually created a foundation that's unsustainable to continue. But because we've actually achieved our goals, what's actually being said, whether it's an internal recognition or external recognition, we then try to maintain that. So we've created a new set point, which then leads into the fatigue, the issues with sleep. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is waking up tired but going to bed wired. um, we've got things around changes in behaviors. And when we talk about behaviors, we're also looking about how you're engaging with other people. So are you somebody that was like super chilled and super cool, calm and collected, and now you're snapping really quickly? Or are you withdrawing? Are you doing both? And we're looking at the physical impact. I look really heavily. So my background is as a nutritionist and I was a gut health specialist. One of the things that we can also look at is gut health and other physical health. So like lowered immune systems, getting sick frequently, obviously headaches, things like that. And obviously we can start looking at that apathy phase as well. They're the progressive. Once we get to apathy, I'm pretty far down the garden path though, to be honest.
Mm.
Thanks, guys. Tom, can we get the results of that poll, please? Great. So as a collective here, 61% of us look at our phone as soon as we wake up, and the remainder, 39%, don't. So I hope I could be more like you guys in the 39%. But it, it's clear that, as a society, we are accessing our devices, and as I mentioned before, it can get us into some form of a negative habit. And coming on to more physical pain points, and again with my optometrist hat on, something that I'm passionate about, and what we're seeing from research is how digital eye strain is now something that almost has been normalized. We're spending many hours on screens, and actually 90% of screen-based users suffer from one symptom of digital eye strain every single day. So that's your eye discomfort, eye fatigue, tired eyes, headaches. And at the moment, interesting enough, employees, the only way they solve this is by taking time off work. So when you're suffering from dry or tired eyes, all you do is you kind of go and take a break. There's nothing really in place to support employees from that digital eye strain and glare from screens, etc. at the moment. So yeah, I guess Ellis, Katie, anything that you can advise or suggest for employees or organizations when it comes to digital eye strain, or any thoughts on this topic?
as you say, taking breaks has got to be the priority. And I think that the habit we have now is to use a screen for certain things. But I do wonder if can we try and avoid that in certain ways? Going back to old-fashioned paper and pen can be really, really valuable. I say that as I'm sat here with a remarkable, which is, a paper tablet. But, I do sometimes think I need a whiteboard, I need a pen and paper. I just want to give my eyes a break in order to support my physical health. I think those two things combined can really make a really big difference without causing too much. But I do think it's hard because so much of our life is designed to be online nowadays. So
Mm.
that's the only factor is that as an organization, I think we do need to be, or I know we do need to be thinking about how the work is designed, because we can't just expect everything to be on screens without the compromise of our eye strain.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think we have to start looking at how we've designed the workplaces, like Zoom meetings and how many emails are coming in and things like that, and really understanding as an organization as well as an individual, looking at what are some of the things that it's like realistic, like can this be sustainable and is this realistic? I think that's a massive one. I think one thing that when I work with my clients, when I work with companies, it's looking at how have you designed your day. So we look at the individuals, like as individuals, what can you do differently? Yeah, of course, don't check your phone when you first wake up because that actually can really support that, reducing that screen time and set different habits in place. But I also think it's looking at, okay, could we exactly what you said, Ellis. Is there an actual way to get back to pen and paper? Does it have to be a Zoom? Does it have to be a Zoom meeting? Could we do it in person and get away from those screens, as well as obviously when you're in person, you can build a better connection and all that kind of jazz as well, which is probably a different topic for a different day. But even just thinking about, hey, like question to the audience, how many of you eat lunch at your desk while looking at a screen or looking at your phone? As you guys reply to that, I'm going to say there's quite a few people in there. The first person says nope. So, but I think a
Some
lot of
people are
us do.
guilty.
Yeah, there's a few guilty people in there as well. So I
I
think,
do, yeah.
create that time, when we have lunch, switch off your screen, turn off your phone, and actually engage in what you're eating. And, a lot of, again, this is a nutrition mind of me. It's going to aid your digestion. It's going to increase energy. It's going to make you feel better. But I think these things can be really important.
Yeah, and I think normalizing, as people leaders, can we normalize taking meetings with our team members on the go on a phone? Like, in our company, we have meetings on the phone where I can get outside, walk and talk, but I don't have to stare at a screen, for example. So there's those kinds of things that organizations can implement. And also looking at it from the eye perspective, what's really interesting is in the UK, 24% of the UK's population have never had an eye exam or not had one in the last 5 years. And when we talk about digital eye strain, and actually MSK as well, up to 35% of MSK issues with your neck, back, and shoulders start with your eyes, because actually, if you can't see your screen, you're going to be moving closer like this. I think, Ellis, you mentioned tech neck or something
I
like
did.
that.
Yeah.
And that's going to, have an impact on employees. So actually, for employees to, we've got so much to do, but actually it's important. Have we had our eyes checked? Do we need any supplemental support in terms of glass or whatever to make sure that we can see our screens? Because if not, that's going to be contributing to these factors as well as all the screen time that's happening.
I think that's a massive one. Sorry, Alice, you go.
Go on. Yeah, Dhruvan, I think I read somewhere that actually our natural preference is to make things comfortably visually. So naturally, we're going to lean and change our posture in order to to have the eyes as our preference. Is that something that you come across? Because that's where all the techniques are coming from. We're leaning towards the phone instead of bringing it up to us.
Yeah, totally. I always give people advice in terms of their workstation is make sure your laptop is at arm's length away minimum. Because what happens is when it's closer than that distance, your eyes converge. And you can simply see this by if you put your finger, towards your nose, you'll start seeing your eyes coming together to one point. And when they converge, they're doing something known as accommodation. And that uses visual power. And that means, You only have so much of that in a day. And if you're doing that for 8 hours on a screen, I guarantee you by the second hour, your visual system is going to be fried. So it's really important that your eyes are naturally what we call as optometrists looking at infinity, where they're straight and they're not converging. So distance plays a massive part, and especially also, for handheld devices, it's difficult because you have to hold it within a hand to use it. But bearing in mind, try not to hold them too close because it uses more of that convergence and accommodation power.
What would even this is for you, how long do you think people should be on screens per session? So if someone's like on the computer, is it like after an hour, take a break? Like, what is your recommendation and what have you seen?
I think best practice for me personally is 45 minutes is kind of that top end. And there's a rule called the 20-20-20 rule, which is every 20 minutes, take a 20-second break and look 20 feet away. But realistically, I mean, every 20 minutes you'll be up and down for forever, right? I don't know
Yeah.
about you guys, but you kind of need to get to work. So every 20 minutes you can't be.
That I can tell you from a psychological point of view, that doesn't help your flow state of
No.
concentrating. So sorry, but I'm going to have to disagree with the eye rule there.
I think it's a nice concept, but I think, as Ellis said, like that ability, that cognitive shift would be massive and a massive strain physically and emotionally and cognitively to do that every 20 minutes. But I like the 45 minutes sort of
Yeah,
kind
Yeah,
of break.
it's
I
difficult.
can get
So it's
behind that
45
one.
minutes. Yeah, it's a little bit more tangible. And then I mean, for everyone will know when their kind of ceiling is for when their visual system or their bodies are getting fatigued. And it's really useful for everyone to cognitively think about their day and maybe make a note or a diary to actually say, when is it, do I need to adjust mine to 30 minutes or can I do it for an hour? And it's really particular to everyone because all our biologies are different, right, in that sense. So in terms of setting a rule, it's, use 45 minutes as that kind of line in the sand and then think about what works for you and your working schedule. And I think that's going to make the most difference to everyone's kind of working day.
Mm.
Awesome. Okay, I will move on to the next question. How does stress and screen posture combine to create that wired but exhausted feeling?
I think we're just constantly on high alert from our stress hormone and overstimulated, and we're getting that physical fatigue. If you think about a typical screen heavy day for you, you might sit in your bed for a while and check your phone. You might take your phone absolutely everywhere that you go. So all morning you might be, looking at a screen with a certain type of posture. And then you sit at your desk or a dining table, and again, you're not necessarily sat in the correct position, so that's making it difficult on your eyes and your physical posture. And then once you get home from work, you might be curled up on the sofa. And it's interesting, like we just move from different size screens sometimes from the morning
Mhm.
through to the evening. Um, and all that time, you're also limiting your breath. So I'd really encourage everyone watching just to take a deep breath and notice how their posture ends up shifting because we're naturally kind of collapsing down on our diaphragms, on our shoulders, and our lung space. So that combined creates this wired but tired feeling because you're constantly on high alert, as Katie was mentioning. Your screen posture is poor, and that will create physical aches and pains. Your breathing is shallow, and breath work is absolutely incredible for stress management. Um, and you just feel tired and unable to relax.
And I think I'll just add into to there as well. I think with us as people, we don't like sort of modern day, we don't give ourselves that cognitive, mental, and emotional sort of limit to decompress. I think, one of the things that when I talk to people is, I ask the question like, how do you wake up? It's like, oh, I'm really exhausted when I wake up. And it's like, okay, what happens when you put your head to the pillow? It's like, the whole day they've been engaged in their phone, work, maybe they've watched Netflix, maybe they're like checking the emails before they go to bed, and then their brain is finally like they're ready to switch down or switch off because they're tired, and then their brain's just like, hey, Let's have a quick chat. Like, let's actually talk about all the things that we needed to sort of go through. And I think that is something that I've noticed a lot is like, and that obviously has such a physical and emotional drain on you because it can be really stressful and really anxiety inducing when you can't sleep. And that whole inability to switch off your brain, it's looking at it from a standpoint of like, have you given yourself enough space to sort of allow yourself to switch off and to decompress and allow your brain to just like, hey, let's have this conversation. It's like, do I need to? But I think that's something that, when we're looking at that wide and tired, that's also really important, coupled with the posture. Like I know last week, I'm not gonna lie, I was on a really strict deadline with a piece of work and I caught myself with my face leaning into my screen, my shoulders were hunched over. I couldn't breathe properly. And I generally had to spend about 20 minutes stretching just to make sure that I could actually open my chest to breathe properly because I was honestly hunched over my desk. So that physical standpoint and that musculoskeletal thing is a real thing.
Call it the
Yeah, it has
prawn
to be.
posture. You're
Yeah.
Yeah.
like bent over like a prawn over your desk.
Yeah. And I had the neck ache, the shoulder ache, the lower back ache. It was everything. So
We should add some slides with some images of the prawn posture. Would have been great.
Yeah, I don't think that's a technical term. Posturite might disagree
And for the people leaders, health and safety executives, and facility managers that are listening, we've got a couple slides that are going to talk about what employees can do and what organizations can do. And if you want to implement change, we know at the moment with other stakeholders that they're looking at what in a real term, what does it mean for the business for any changes to be implemented? So I guess guys, what's the real cost of doing nothing in a performance term for businesses with what we've talked about here, and carry on with the status quo?
Oh, there's so much. There's so much of cost to this. I'll try and keep it brief. Our attention spans are shortening, as a community, so that is being made more possible with screens and the way that work is being designed. So that affects our productivity and our energy levels. The brain drain and the eye strain causes a lot of fatigue. If you're tired, there'll be more errors. There'll be more presenteeism where people are turning up to work, but they're not mentally ready or at working at that optimum level. Burnout, of course. Also, what we use screens for is impacting our relationships. So people have been mentioning in the chat box about how, we don't really do that much face to face. We just send an instant message or an email, or we communicate via Zoom, or some other video conferencing site. And so the culture at work is shifting. It's becoming less collaborative. There's more miscommunication, and then there's going to be more conflict as a result of that. And also, because we are in this rat race of trying to get so much done, I'm finding now that people are starting to make more mistakes and errors, but also there's a real risk of ethical issues where people are cutting corners because they don't necessarily have time to be able to put things into to put the time into work, basically. So um, this is causing a real issue currently because of how we've essentially designed the work. And from a business perspective, financially, all of those things cost money. So it's a real financial burden on businesses if you do absolutely nothing.
yeah, I think I couldn't agree more. Like when we look at the cost of stress, burnout, presenteeism, absenteeism, one of the leading causes of people being signed off for work is either stress or musculoskeletal issues. So it is a massive, massive problem when we're looking at just simply the cost on the business as well. And, one thing that we really focus on with GIST is looking at what are the behaviors you currently have in your organization that's creating a culture and how is that aligning with your business strategy? Because at the end of the day, if you can understand what behaviors are there, how that's, impacting communication, collaboration, what that means for a team, what that means for an organization, and seeing how much potential profits or turnover and all that is costing you, it's astronomical. And I think a lot of companies, we've kind of created a norm around it. And that's something that's quite scary for me to see, but it's well, it depends on the size of your organization, but we're looking at like hundreds of thousands, if not millions, depending on the number of employees and the size of your business. It's a huge cost. Huge.
Brilliant. Right. I'm conscious of time, so we've got I'm gonna give you both one minute in total to talk about
We're
um
on time limits
what
now.
what indeed. I want us to get to the question and answer so people have enough
Sure.
time to answer questions and get them answered. What can employees do from their perspective to help them day to day?
Go on, Katie, you go first.
Yeah, go first. I think my first step point, I'm going to be real quick. My first thing that would be to you is really understand where you're at. So check in with yourself. So ask yourself, how am I feeling physically, mentally, and emotionally? Rate yourself from 0 to 10, 0 being you're completely wiped out, 10 being I'm running at, full capacity. Looking at your habits that you've engaged in, really looking at all of those kind of things, and then look at one behavioral change that you can do. So whether that is, you know what, I actually have noticed that I'm checking my phone more. I'm going to make sure I'm going to get up, have a coffee, go outside, whatever it is, before I check my phone. Great thing there. But really understanding where you're starting the day from, and then looking at what is one thing I can do differently to get me a little bit closer to that 10.
Yeah, I agree. Let's put boundaries on our phone use or tech use generally, reducing notifications. I noticed people in the chat box were talking about that, but remember every time you download something, the default settings are going to be to try and take as much attention from you as possible and keep you on the screen as long as possible. So reduce or turn off notifications and therefore interruptions. That's good for your brain. Um, Schedule focus time and lunch breaks. Actually, I do feel like the way that lots of these apps work, we've lost the autonomy on when and how we do work. So we're just constantly in back-to-back meetings or we're being interrupted. So scheduling focus time, lunch breaks, and also your finishing time. If you know you're somebody that kind of it bleeds into your work life, sorry, your home life. Um, and one thing we can all do to protect everybody else is schedule send exists for a reason. So if you are somebody who is working more flexibly or you have an international business, um, schedule send and protect other people's time as well. And I always find that's helpful because then it's at the top of their inbox when they start work. So you might get a reply quicker as well.
Love that tip. I'm an avid user of that. Brilliant. Thank you, guys. And I guess finally, what can organizations do? And with the vast stakeholders in the room in this webinar, there's a couple things that you can encourage your business to do to support when it comes to how employees can interact better, be more productive, and look after their health. One thing is build display screen DSE assessments into onboarding and ongoing touch points. What we see is a lot of businesses do either or, and that just means that you have problems throughout. And as Katie mentioned, musculoskeletal issues are one of the biggest causes of people being off work. So actually, if you have a proactive approach, then that's going to stop these problems in the future. Secondly, encourage your employees to have eye examinations. Most people that engage with eye care vouchers or eye schemes in a business usually wear glasses, and that's only 1/3 of the population. So you're leaving out 2/3 of the population of your organization because they don't wear glasses. People that wear glasses are encouraged themselves because their prescription might change, etc. But let's not forget the other 2/3. So implementing an eye care scheme within the organization can support employees, and maybe looking at digital tools like the one Ocushield offers with digital screening can help engage a hybrid workforce where they can't get to an eye examination because of whatever reason. And lastly, creating a culture of sharing employee stories. I think there's lots of employees that proactively do the right thing for their well-being and have great performance outputs. How can you leverage those to tell that story to the organization, and get employees to be more like them? Brilliant. So that is the end of the webinar. So thank you, Katie and Ellis. We will move on to the Q&A. So I will just toggle the right options on my Zoom here to bring it up. and we can run through that now. So hopefully there's a couple of questions there. If not, feel free to drop some questions if you do have one into the chat now. And bear with while I just bring up the Q&A. Okay. Right, a fair few questions here. Okay. I'm going to start with the shortest one to begin with whilst I work through the order to give you guys. Okay, first question. How important is it for concentration in getting up, walking around, say on a 3-hour Zoom session?
Oh, it's interesting. Just so vital. We cannot concentrate for 3 hours. That just is really difficult and I think impossible. Our brains work differently, so do bear in mind that some people might find it more easier to concentrate, others might find it more difficult. Um, Standing up, moving around generally increases, well, you're going to take a break by doing that, which is fantastic. So you're kind of ticking off Druven's rule of taking that break of away from your screen. The movement is helpful as well because you're able to breathe better when you're standing up and moving around. And you generally get some of those good hormones when you are moving as well, which can also help with your concentration and reducing the stress hormones as well. So yeah, moving around is absolutely essential on a 3-hour Zoom call. And I do think that in terms of learning and development, we really need to design that better as well. If you are having meetings or if you're doing any kind of like course or something like that, it's you know, taking breaks every 50 minutes is my kind of go-to design. So that yeah, you're not just completely fatigued because it is more difficult to learn online, or focus online than it is to do it face to face, as long as the environment's appropriate.
I would absolutely agree with that. I think 3 hours Zooms are.
And do it.
Oh, I don't want to be. If you're saying it, you've obviously got one booked in. They're not my favorite thing in the world. I remember back in the days of COVID when people would ask me to come and do 3-hour workshops for their companies, and I'm like, why don't we do like 3 1-hour blocks of it just to like break it up because people are not going to listen to me after the first hour. So
Mm, mm.
it's you get distracted. It's really tough. So.
Thank you. This is a great question. Um, do we have any examples of organizations who have made the change to more face-to-face and less digital-based work, where the direction is intentionally digitally orientated?
The
Um,
answer is
Go ahead.
yes, but it's not always gone down very well. And so one of the things that I would say is hybrid has been proven to be best. So just going full time back into the office is not what I'd recommend. And it also needs to be communicated better as to why we're going back into the office. Often businesses have put in mandates that are not necessarily well thought through. They're just kind of, picked out of thin air about we're going to go back 3 days a week or 4 days a week or 2 days a week. But actually, it's helpful to have a think about the workplace, the type of work that you're doing, the people that you're supporting, and designing your hybrid working policy from that. And that's the issue is that if you haven't done that, then the response can be quite negative. I have not personally come across anyone doing it for a screen time reason, so I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I've not come across a company that's doing it for screen time reasons. I mean, most of the times it's productivity and performance-based reasons why people are being brought back into the office. The biggest dilemma, as Ellis said, is that communication piece. So really like talking to your employees about the why and the how, and that's been very missed, especially if you've not engaged the employees in understanding the how that's going to work. So yes, I've seen it. It's definitely we've all seen it in the news. It's definitely not going down well with your
Try not to
Well,
company.
name names.
Not gonna name
yeah,
not
yeah.
gonna name names. But yeah, it's definitely yeah, it needs to be like you need to have a community, you need to have a conversation properly. It needs to be transparent and it also needs to be realistic. And I think that's the problem that we've seen.
Yeah, totally. And if anyone wants any support to bring that to the agenda for the organization, feel free to reach out. We'll help how we can.
Reach
Last
out.
question. Yeah, last question. This from Nisha. Any tips for better eye care? My eyes always feel heavy, watery, and tired. I'm studying at the moment. Digital assessments, not visiting my optician yet. Um, but for better eye care, I think fundamentally we need to make sure that we've got eyes tested to make sure that if we need prescription glasses for VDU, we've got that in place. The second piece is when we're looking at screens, we only blink 3 to 5 times in a minute. We should be blinking 15 to 20 times in a minute. And when we blink, it actually lubricates your eyes. Therefore, if you spend 8 hours on screens when you're not blinking enough, you're getting that dry, itchy, tired eye feeling. So this sounds a bit daft, but if you can write on a post-it note, blink and put it on the corner of your screen, you will remind yourself to blink, which actually helps with that heavy, watery, tired feeling. And then what else you can do is you can also use anti-glare and blue light filters, which reduce some of that visual stress, which can support on the day-to-day environment. Things like eye drops also support as well. But I can keep talking and there's probably lots more there. But I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to wrap up now. There will be a survey sent out to everyone on this session, so please do answer that when you can. And if you guys want to reach out to anyone here on this call, please do find us on LinkedIn if needed, or if there's any questions for the speakers, just send us an email at business@ocushield.com. And if there's anything you need in regards to MSK, you've got Posturite there that you can contact, anything regarding eye care myself. We do have 2 more webinars coming up, and I will just drop the link into the chat where you can have a look at what the topics are. And if you want to come along, please do. But yeah, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, Katie Ellis, for your fantastic input.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.